gentlemen, our chairman of the board, Mr. Vernon Jones.
I pride myself on keeping composure, but it's times like this that I just cry like a little kid, and I'm not ashamed of it. A funny thing about the Carl Sims situation is that we had people with eyes on him making sure we knew where he was. And we did a very good job of that until his family got here, and then we lost sight of him, and we didn't know where he was. And so we snuck the family into the restaurant around the corner where you couldn't see him over there. And I don't know, Carl's not in here, but I'll tell him that that little phone call that was made to his room just to quote-unquote check on, see how he felt, was actually just an espionage thing that we were doing, trying to locate him. But apparently it worked out all right. Dana said tonight was going to be a very busy night, and I wouldn't have a lot of time, and you just don't know how glad I am that I don't have a lot of time. Because you will never know how long I have anguished over this part of my responsibilities of being your chairman. I am not a public speaker. Just like you callers out there, I have stood in front of people holding a microphone and called to them, but they weren't staring at me like a bunch of buzzards waiting for something to happen. So for inspiration, I went back as far as I could go to look at speeches that the chairman before me had given. As I was reading these speeches, it was obvious that the majority of them had a recurring theme. Practically all the speeches of the last 20 years contained some kind of reference to change. They all said that square dance clubs need to change, that square dance organizations need to change, that callers need to change, and that CALLERLAB needs to change. People have cried that CALLERLAB should perform market research and conduct surveys to find out what would entice people to come into this great activity of ours. And CALLERLAB heard those cries and acted upon them. CALLERLAB has hired an outside firm to conduct a survey. This was many years ago, or not many years ago, just several years ago. The survey that was conducted involved using 3 groups of existing dancers and former dancers that had dropped out for whatever reason. The survey also included 3 groups of people who had never square danced before. Once the surveys were completed, the firm that conducted them put together a presentation to let us know what the findings were. And we didn't want to believe the results. So the crowd went out to conduct more surveys. So CALLERLAB decided to conduct more surveys. We conducted and paid for 3 internet surveys to gather more information. And when the results were presented, in the words of Jim Mayo, we simply chose not to believe them. And the question we should now be asking is, when are we going to believe them? Well, I'm here to tell you now that the time is now. All of us in this room work very hard to help with our square dance situation, but we all have to do a little more, and the time is now. All of us need to help to get people involved in better recruiting, and the time is now. All of us need to do a better job ourselves at recruiting new people, and the time is now. Many folks have told me that they have asked all the people they know. If that is true, then it's time to start asking people we don't know, and the time is now. We need to try new and different things, and the time is certainly now. To the people who are trying new and different things, I applaud you. But there are still people that are trying to throw up roadblocks and stop these new ideas from taking hold, and that needs to stop, and the time is now. Out of one of these trials may come the next big thing that could lead us to the new and prosperous day, and we should be encouraging these experiments and lobbying for their success, and the time is now. We need to again become proud of what we do and not be afraid and embarrassed to advertise to the outside world that we are in the square dance activity, and that time is now. I have heard many callers who have been calling a long time say something to the effect of the younger people need to take charge and do all the work for square dancing to get better. Young people. Look around this room, ladies and gentlemen, we are young people. The average age of CALLERLAB is creeping ever closer to 70. Yes, that's true. I was talking a while ago with caller Gary Shoemake. Most of us in this room know who he is. After we had discussed several items, he made a comment to me that really struck home. He said, "Vernon, you younger callers are going to have to make some very tough choices in the coming years. It is not the tough choices that got my attention, but the fact that he referred to me as a young caller. I am 58 years old and will be 59 this year, and I'm referred to as a young caller. I will tell you a story that I have told before. I began calling in 1978, which was 38 years ago. When I began calling, I did as all new callers did. I joined the North Texas Callers Association. At the time that I joined, I was the youngest caller in the association. 38 years later, and with the exception of only one caller, and that by only 1 year, I am still the youngest caller in the North Texas Callers Association. Our problem is obvious. People throughout history have asked themselves and labored about what they are going to be remembered for. We know that the early start of square dancing was brought to the New World from Europe, and that it spread westward as more and more people traveled to make new lives. Then came the Renaissance of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and we have all heard the names of Henry Ford and Benjamin Lovett in the building of Lovett Hall. We know the story of Lloyd Pappy Shaw and how his Cheyenne Mountain dancers traveled across the country spreading the art and recreation of square dancing, and we know what they will be remembered for. We know about how square dancing began to grow during the 40s and 50s, and the stories of Bob Osgood, Les Gocher, Ralph Page, and the emergence of a caller from Texas named Raymond Smith, and we know what they will be remembered for. We have learned about the heyday of the 60s and 70s and how 20 squares a night was the normal turnout, and how the number of callers grew at a rapid pace, and as a result, the number of new calls was also increasing at a rapid pace, and there were way too many different programs being danced, and how all of this prompted Bob Osgood to gather a group of callers to come to a meeting to talk about a solution to this ever-growing problem. That group became the founding members of CALLERLAB, and we all know what they will be remembered for. We know the state of square dancing during the 80s and 90s, and we all saw the start of the decline in numbers. We have been talking about different ways and ideas to stop or at least slow down this downward trend for almost 20 years now, but we have yet to discover the answer or the next big thing that would bring us out of this downward spiral. Which brings us to the question of what do we in this room right now want to be remembered for? I know what I want to be remembered for. I don't want to be remembered for recording square dance songs. I don't want to be remembered for being a member of the Board of Governors. I don't want to be remembered for being a member of the Executive Committee, and I don't want to be remembered for being chairman of the Board of CALLERLAB, although I am very proud of all of these things. What I really want to be remembered for is being a part of a group that came together, worked together, saw a problem, and didn't sidestep around it or run away from it. I want to be a member of a team that saw an obstacle and ran headstrong straight for it and tackled it to the ground. All of us in this room tonight, together with all the callers who are not with us at this convention, can turn this around. I want to be remembered as the generation of callers who realized the ship was in peril, righted the ship, filled it full of fuel, and set it on a course for sustainability, success, and glory, and working together we can all make that happen, and the time is now. Thank you.